Dracule Mihawk and Nico Robin might actually be the Devil's children. You know, the powerful kin of the great emo themselves. Maybe they're his direct children, or at the very least his far descendants who are gonna play a massive role in the final saga, maybe because their joint connection to emu. Alright, so after seeing the official emu design, I just knew I'd have to revisit the old idea of Mihawk being connected to emu, because at this point, I kind of feel like if I don't remind you all about emu and Mihawk's potential family bond, then I'm being basically a bad One Piece creator. So let me start off with the smoking gun piece of evidence. The clan name Dracule. You and I both know, being smart people, that Dracule Mihawk's name clearly is not Nerona. Case closed, end of the video, but that's actually just not the case. When you actually look at the name's origin, it practically confirms Mihawk is connected to Mu directly. Dracula, of course, is just based on Dracula, which itself comes from Dracule. Now, historically, Dracule actually translates to Son of the Dragon, something I've already used in the past to explain that Mihawk and emu connection. Celestial Dragon King, Son of the Dragon, you're kind of catching my drift, right? But what I don't usually address, or at least didn't so far, is that Dracule also translates to Son of the Devil, as in the devil, whom emu just, like, is. The ruler of the celestial dragons who uses the devil/devil fruits. I mean, that's pretty big. But honestly, there's just so much more evidence that makes it feel damn near confirmed at this point, and we're gonna get into all of it. Take, for example, the one detail that I just genuinely cannot beat any harder at this point. It's like one of the deadest horses in the One Piece theory community. I'm talking, of course, about those beautiful, luscious, special eyes. Those naughty double-ringed eyes are emu supremo, as far as I'm concerned, and Dracule Mihawk having hawk eyes, right, just feels like a very strong point of character design, especially when he was first introduced in the story. You know, the sharp pupils, intense focus, that almost predatory stillness that he has, it just makes him feel like a total boss ever since we got first introduced to him during the East Blue. At least until we met Emu, and it became pretty much undeniable that there was some connection in some way between them, because dude, they have the same eyes. The shape is pretty much identical. That narrow, almost like regal gaze, the double rings, the spooky energy. It's basically one-to-one, except maybe for the color, is what I would say if that was actually the case. Before we get into all of that though, I'm always looking for ways to be more productive, as you know, like using my free time to work on my Japanese skills, but even I can't resist a little bit of screen time every now and then. Lucky for me, I found a way to play games on my phone that's not only productive, it's profitable, and oh my god, it's a sponsor! Free Cash. On Free Cash, you can play games, answer surveys, and much more, and actually earn money doing it. It's not enough to quit like your day job, but a little bit extra cash for some time I'd be spending on my phone anyways sure doesn't hurt. As you can see, like if you open the app, you can see all the different games and stuff and everything you can do. It shows you the details, what you need to do in order to unlock it, download it, play for a little bit, and then there's all these like little like requirements you can basically fulfill in order to earn something, and you can cash out at a certain point. There's like a bunch of different ways to do it. Like, let's for example try playing this game for a little bit, right? So once we've played a little bit, you can actually see, we can go back into the app, it shows, like it checks that we've played enough, and then, you know, you get your reward there, and then once you start accumulating enough, that's when you at some point can cash out. Sounds too good to be true? Well, I was a little bit skeptical at first too, but Free Cash has pretty great reviews on Trustpilot and was recently ranked in the top 3 apps in the App Store and Google Play. You do have to remember to enable tracking so that you can actually get your payouts correctly and the app actually knows that you've been playing other games, right? But the minimum payout is $25, and as you can see here, it's super convenient with plenty of different options where you can send your money to. You can see all of them. I personally just use PayPal because it's the most convenient, but you know, whatever works for you. And if you use my link in the description or my QR code here, you even get $10 as a bonus. Been super easy getting in the habit of just earning a little bit of extra money on Free Cash instead of just endlessly scrolling throughout social media, which arguably, like, just not a great thing to do. So again, thanks to Free Cash for sponsoring this video, and with that, back to solving the mystery. In the anime, Mihawk's eyes are yellow, yes, but in the official manga coloring, those bad boys are actually red. But once you see that connection, it becomes very hard to ignore everything else about Mihawk's design that just starts lining up in ways that just feel like way too deliberate. Mihawk being a descendant of the devil feels just so unavoidable to me for like just about every single reason. Let's just look at another point here, which is his outfit, right? He's a hot guy, and he's also a sleek guy. His clothing is clean, composed, almost aristocratic, long coat, ornate patterns, fancy patterns. It kind of feels like he's a holy knight out of town, right? And honestly, that's just because that might be exactly what's going on here. Now, obviously, that alone doesn't mean that he's a holy knight or even a royal. I mean, when you place Mihawk next to the aesthetic of the Holy Land, it still feels pretty right, I would say, and it's doubled down with all the crosses that he's got going on. Yoru, Mihawk's sword, is literally a massive black cross that kind of bears some resemblances to the empty throne and like the big logo of the world government. His necklace is a cross, even the structure of his ship gives big cross energy, so clearly this isn't a one-off random design choice. Oda wants us to tie Mihawk's appearance to the Holy Land, aka Marijua. And the use of terms like saint to describe the celestial dragons, the connections to the Eve tree, the religious outfits of characters like Gunko when she's in the flower room, not whatever's happening on Elbaf, not that I'm complaining. I don't think it's too wild to assert that Mihawk's cross theme oozes this Holy Land, holy like people, celestial dragon energy. Also, random fact, when it comes to birds, no one does it better than two guys in One Piece, Mihawk and Doflamingo. And I personally don't believe that it's a coincidence that these two are both warlords and have bird epithets specifically. Consider the fact again that Don Quixote Doflamingo is actually a fallen celestial dragon, a man who was born amongst the gods of the world and then cast down into the regular world. Now, it's just a connection, but it's a pretty important piece of evidence, I think, to connect Mihawk even further to everything that's going on, you know, up there. Since, again, they are the birds of the warlords, animals inherently tied to the skies, the heavens, and even godly figures. Ra, Horus, Zeus, all these supreme godly beings are very much bird adjacent. And so couple that with the fact that Doflamingo's story is about a fall from heaven, about losing divine status and trying to claw it back through violence and control and manipulation, and I do think that Oda might be getting a little bit cheeky with it here and making it incredibly ironic that Mihawk might actually be related to Emu, since he doesn't really care about all that power and status stuff at all, at least not anymore. So far in the story, for all we can tell, he's never really been the scheming type. He doesn't actively try and manipulate, and he really only joins groups like the Warlords or Cross Guild so that he can kind of keep his independence with as little resistance as possible. And at least to me personally, that difference could be super important, because if Hockey Boy is a Nerona, or at least Nerona adjacent, it also seems to suggest that Mihawk's relationship to power isn't the same as, say, Dofi Boy. Really, if anything, it kind of feels like Mihawk has figured out his complex internal feelings towards status, right? Like whatever connection he may have had to that heavenly world, he chose to walk actively away from it, it seems. So, where does all of that actually bring us, and what does it actually mean? What's going on? Do I believe that Mihawk is Emu's son? And if so, how does that change the final saga? Because it probably should. Well, if you're curious, let me allow to punch in on the sun point for starters, because despite everything I've said, I don't really think that Mihawk is Emu's, like, direct son, direct kid, right? That feels a little bit too clean for Oda, and Mihawk's age and role don't quite line up for that kind of reveal personally, I think. So, you're lucky, Mu. It seems like you're not the father. But on the other hand, a far-off descendant of Emu, who after all is very, very ancient, you know, a weird little offshoot bloodline that was the result of Emu spreading his devil seed? That could have happened pretty much anywhere over the last 800 years. Now, that feels much more on the money personally, because you just know that even though Emu is die-hard obsessed with Lily, he can probably still get some. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mihawk knows that. It would kind of help form a very unique bond between him and Shanks, you know, children or family of powerful Holy Knight families who kind of went out there and, yeah, you know, did their thing. Let's not talk about it for YouTube's sake, but narratively, Mihawk acts like someone who understands status and power, but instead opts to just, you know, chill by himself instead of abusing his birthright. And I've been kind of starting to wonder if that's because Mihawk somehow, some way managed to get out of that system. But I don't know if that's gonna last forever, since we've now seen that Emu is very much capable of possessing other people, using them as their vessels, right? I mean, Gunko being just the clearest example here recently. And I did even talk about a while ago that this fancy new body reveal might not even be Mu's real body. I personally like to think that this might be Nika's real body or Joy Boy's, but could just be a handful of figures from the ancient past that, you know, Emu has kind of body snatched and just possessed as vessels. Regardless though, what we already know is that Emu prefers vessels anyways, probably because when he leaves the Holy Land, he starts very inconveniently coughing up blood. So now imagine the potential for Mihawk here. Someone who might have the right lineage, the right physical traits, the right compatibility that is necessary. In other words, a perfect host, and I do think that this may have happened before in the past. Really think about this. If Emu has ever attempted to try and inhabit Mihawk, that would actually explain like a lot. The shared eyes, the insane strength, and also the like unsettling and almost like disconnected emotion of Hawkeye's. But what if they are the same because Mihawk is a host that in the past managed to break free? I very much think that this could definitely work from just a visual standpoint. They have the same eyes because Mihawk was a vessel or is part of that lineage, but has no longer been subjected to Emu's influence. Funnily enough, it also actually helped explain another Emuite fella in the story, Zunisha here. They also have the same eyes, but again, a little bit different color, so maybe that big crime that Zunisha committed and is being punished for was resisting Emu's control somehow during the Void Century War, and that's why Big Z was punished to wander the world. And actually, if that point turns out to be close to the mark or even be true, then Mihawk isn't just connected to Emu's powers, he's someone who has already in the past potentially defied it, and as a result, maybe he could actually reveal the true solution to saving, well, the world and pretty much everyone on it. That could be the true payoff of this devilish sun connection here. As in, the devil's son may actually end up helping everyone break the devil's control and weaken Emu by preventing the use of one of his most powerful techniques. If Mihawk could actually break the Domi Reversi or even the influence of the demonic covenants through the tattoos, that'd be pretty clutch. But there's also another side to this as well. Because if Mihawk was once a viable vessel to Emu, or if he was actually never one to begin with, well, he still might be. Like, Mihawk end up being a vessel in the endgame because he's inherently super compatible as an offshoot of Emu's bloodline potentially. But he's also not the only person who even may be a descendant of the devil. Another Straw Hat might actually be as well, and this one is even more fun and interesting, I think. Nico Robin. Now, I know that I simply can't be the only one who had to do like a double take after looking at low-key super attractive Devil Emu. The moment Emu's design was revealed for the first time, there was just this strange sense of familiarity that I just personally couldn't shake. Not just in the eyes, but like in the face overall. And at first I thought maybe it's like Shinra Banshomen and the Otsutsuki from Boruto, but the reality was that it was a Straw Hat because Robin looks a lot like Emu. Yeah, I'm being serious. When you start comparing Emu to Robin, and even more specifically to Nico Olvia, it gets kinda hard to ignore here. They got the exact same face. I mean, literally look at this side by side of Olvia and Emu. They've got the same nose, potentially the same skin color. Jury's still out on that, obviously, depending what direction Oda goes with that. And it kind of seems like the same hair color, which is this silvery white. The only difference kind of is the eyes and the body markings. Now, obviously I'm not dumb, or at least not that dumb. Oda has a very recognizable art style, right? Let's not beat around the bush. Characters sometimes share features like this all the time. Literally half the women in One Piece look the same. But I don't know, man. Like, this one feels different, and that's because Robin herself has, of course, a lot of thematic ties to the devil as well, and even a more specific physical similarity that really seems to boost this theory specifically for me as well. Take Wano, for example, right? Which maybe was already on your mind when I mentioned this. Robin's demonial fleur transformation is one of the most striking moments and absolutely baddest techniques in the franchise. Robin doesn't just grow larger, stronger, and hotter, she also changes form and just completely mirrors Emu's design, complete with brand new horns and wings and scary evil eyes that aren't Emu's eyes, yes, but kind of feel just as soul-piercing. But come on, like seriously? Those horns specifically carry like a direct shape match to Emu's horns, which, to be clear, I've been looking at a lot of horns lately, and Emu's, turns out, are actually fairly unique in One Piece, except for these demonial fleur horns as well that are kind of the same. Also, since it was a little bit easy to miss, it's a little bit unclear, but it does very much seem like Emu also has devil wings, and they are very briefly seen here when Mu is actually transforming from his shadowy blob form inside Ora's castle, and you know, like the stuff comes out of his back. Looks like those would be wings. But it's not just physical connections that stuck out to me with Robin, it's also narrative, because in case you forgot, Robin has, from the start, always been called the Devil Child. Devil Child. Jesus. At first, that was just like a label, right? A cruel nickname given to a child who survived something she shouldn't have, who knew things she wasn't supposed to know. She was just evil by world government standards and by association. And you know, we do know that the world government do love calling their enemies devils. Cobra, Luffy, Roger, Zebek. They're all devils in Emu's eyes, right? So it makes perfect sense for Robin to be the same case, since she's all about finding the true history and reading the poneglyph, and that's just a big no-no as far as the world government is concerned as well. So up until this point, I've always just kind of accepted the fact that this might be a title that's just propaganda by the government, but what if that title was, you know, a lot closer to the truth than any of us ever realized? And this might actually low-key even directly reveal the original founding family of Ohara itself, because unlike some of the big family names in One Piece like Monkey, Gold, Davy, Nico hasn't really been fully explored yet. It's just kind of there, passed down from Olvia to Robin. But what if the Nico clan wasn't just a family of scholars? What if they were a branch of something older, something much older? An offshoot, maybe, of the original Nerona family that betrayed them and worked with Joy Boy's coalition during the Void Century. And you know, ironically, Robin and Mu having a connection creates a really ironic situation in the narrative as well, because quite frankly, Robin's vibe is kind of the opposite of Emu's. Robin seeks the truth, Emu does just about everything possible to somehow bury it. So it does create this kind of poetic inversion that One Piece and specifically Oda just loves to play with, like a Rocinante and a Doflamingo situation, or even a Garp and a Dragon one. It's an internal familial split, one side preserving a lie, the other side chasing the truth that will ultimately destroy it. And if you think I'm just pulling out very loose narrative strings here, sure, I may be, but I also want to point out that one of these moments, a moment where Robin is trying to save her friends, preserve knowledge, and defeat the Holy Knights, is a moment that Oda decided to draw Robin with the emu eyes. This panel from chapter 1147 shows Robin with the eyes. Okay, so now you kind of see my point here. What would that actually point towards in the end game if for a second we assume and accept that this might be the case? Well, quite simply, I think it could hint at yet another Robin is captured moment that's kind of been hinted at by Oda for a while now. I mean, the government has already tried their best to do this, but after Imu is bound to stomp out everyone on Elbaf, and maybe even kill a Strahd in the process, then maybe he'll just grab his own descendant while he's at it. But I actually think it might go completely differently as well. Let's go back a little bit to the best arcs in One Piece, at least for me personally, because Water 7 and Enies Lobby were completely built on Robin's fear. Her belief that she did not deserve to live, that her existence would only bring harm to the people around her, and that's what made that entire arc so powerful, and the best one in One Piece, because Robin had to choose life. Now, just imagine that scenario happening again, but instead this time, everything is just totally different. Robin at this point in the story just absolutely knows her own worth. She knows that her crew will always come for her no matter what, because they always do, and that could let Robin fake a betrayal, fake an acceptance of the Celestial Dragons so that she can actually learn the true history from them, and then use that to destroy Imu once her crew sets her free. Now, I will admit that there is definitely a very good chance that these theories don't hold up, but maybe that's because Robin and Mihawk may not have a direct connection to Imu, but instead they might have a connection to the vessel that Imu is using instead. Nika's descendants. Alright, so up to this point I've been leaning really hard into the idea that these two are Imu's descendants, and I do think at this point you can at least see why there's some evidence for that absolutely there, even if there is some other stuff that contradicts it, or, you know, if you still disagree with it. First of all, let me know in the comments, that's pretty cool, or if you have stuff that, you know, is pro this argument, I'd love to hear it as well, of course. But what's become pretty much undeniable is that both Mihawk and Robin share a lot of visual and thematic similarities and parallels with Imu, and specifically this new body reveal. So naturally, the safe conclusion is that they might be connected to Imu directly, but what if that entire line of thinking is completely flipped? Because what if the body we're seeing is not Imu's, it's actually Nika's? We've talked about this. The more you look at Imu's reveal design, the more something just feels really off to me. Like, I went over this in so much depth in my initial review and analysis of the Imu design, but I do think it's absolutely worth explaining again, because it's not something I expect you to have on lock when watching this specific video. Because I do notice that when you actually look at the key elements of Imu's design, they actually give off like total Nika vibes and are using all his bells and whistles, the clouds, the silhouettes, the spear, for God's sake. Like, these are all key elements we've been shown over and over again talking about Nika's design. And when you factor in Elbaf with its very unique clothing style that for some reason Imu also seems to be sharing, right? Like, you know, the pants look epic, the belt, the like overall pizzazz, that kind of makes sense for Nika, not Imu. Now, if you haven't watched my full breakdown, which you should, this idea probably sounds a little bit insane at first, but it actually solves a few lingering questions that I've been having with how Imu's powers specifically work. Because if Imu is somehow inhabiting or even corrupting Nika's physical form, then the body hopping and blood spitting makes a lot of sense. This is something that Imu has to do to slay Luffy and Loki. He's using the big weapon, and it may physically be hurting him because of how powerful Nika's body actually is. But then, yes, dear viewer, if this is Nika's body, all of those shared traits that we've been pointing out, the eyes, the horns, the presence, they might not originate from Imu originally at all. They might originate from Nika, which then of course would just completely reframe everything we've talked about with Mihawk and Robin. They could be remnants of the original Liberator. Like, remember, son of the dragon, son of the devil? Well, Nika might literally be the devil physically at least, and I've done a whole video on it if Nika was a dragon, well, he probably has ties to it, and I think it absolutely still holds up. And that same thought also applies to Robin too, but it also implies that Oda may be literally pulling a Gold Roger with Robin's name. Like, the world thinks that his name is Gold Roger instead of Gold D. Roger because his middle initial was not printed right, so what if that is the same case with the name of the sun gods? He might not be Nika, but Nico, and literally it was misheard and misprinted, and that's how the Nika name was formed. Fun fact also, Nika, you might, remember from when it was revealed, is the sound in Japanese that you can make for laughter, but Nika is actually a lot more rare than the actual, laughing sound, which is Nico. Nico is laughing, it's smiling. That's literally, these two are phonetically related. Nika and Nico, that's a whole thing in Japanese. All right, sorry. Future Manu here, who's already been, finishing recording this video and everything. Okay, I just realized something that went completely past me when I thought about the Nico Robin Nika connection earlier on. Nico literally not only means laughter, smiling with a broad grin, like the classic Nika thing, but more common, which we talked about. Nico literally also means sunlight. It's the kanji for the sun and light, that's Nico. Nico Robin is sunlight Robin, smiling Robin. So, yeah, okay. We're gonna continue with the video, but I feel like this needed to be in the video because it just blew my mind actually thinking about it and looking it up, so keep going past Manu. Which could mean that Nico Robin is actually a descendant of the sun god himself, and personally, I kind of love that idea even more than Nico Robin being related to Im. I don't know, you tell me, but I think it makes sense, and it's actually kind of crazy. Narratively, it also lines up because seriously, Mihawk, despite having every single reason to try and conquer, right, chooses not to. He sits at the top of the world in terms of power, right, but has no interest in control, domination, or influence. He doesn't build an empire, he doesn't gather followers, he just exists as free as possible on his own, by his own rules, only choosing to be a warlord to be even freer, sparring with Shanks, partying with Shanks, and just reading his newspaper on his castle. That's all he really wants to do. Robin represents Nika's ideals in her very own way. She has spent her entire life rejecting the systems that try to define her. The world government has labeled her as a devil, hunts her, tries to erase her, but she continues forward anyways, driven not by power, but by the pursuit of knowledge and the truth. A truth that will bring the world true liberation from the terror they've been living under in the form of knowledge. And if all of that's true, which admittedly, again, it might not be, but if it is, then it would also probably mean that Mihawk and Robin aren't going to just be side players in the final saga, they should be smack dab at the center of it all. Alongside one Mr. Monkey D. Luffy, because Luffy isn't just someone who inherited Nika's devil fruit, he just embodies all of Nika's true will. His entire existence is built around freedom, messing up just about any political system and laughing like a little lunatic while doing so. So what might end up happening if Mihawk and Robin are connected to the actual sun gods, to, the original Nika lineage? Could that interact in a really fun and unique way with Luffy's Gear 5th powers? I've really liked the idea that at some point, maybe just how Emu is passing powers and sharing powers onto his followers, Luffy might do the same, so maybe giving something like a Gear 5 version to Robin's devil and maybe even to Mihawk, like Black Blade stuff with Mihawk, that could be absolutely insane. But regardless of who the devil actually is and who these devil children might descend from, one thing is for certain here: Emu's true form is just full of insane mysteries to still be unraveled on top of everything we've talked about. Who else it could be connected to in universe, even in real life? Well, if you want to hear all of that and a full breakdown of the full design with all the weapons and tattoos and everything, check out this very long video where I break down everything about Nerona Emu, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all of our fantastic Patreons, and I already said we're gonna see each other in the next video, so bye.